Bonjour à tous. Welcome to the Nouvel Esprit podcast. We are your hosts. I am Guillermo Moreno.
And I am Jeremy Hossotter.
Awesome. Yes, everyone. Welcome back. We are one man down today, which is, well, it's always unfortunate, but today's topic be very interesting because, of course, everything that we talk about, we address from a Catholic personalist perspective. Um, One topic segueing from our previous topic, which was about social media, is that of video games. So there were quite a few topics that I thought, oh, we should totally touch on one of these in our next podcast episode. And video games stood out to me because the tangent that I wanted to go through regarding that topic in our last episode was, in a manner of speaking, how is it like, are video games, are they worth it? But video games are just different than social media in many respects. Of course, with video games nowadays, we're connected in a way unlike in previous generations, certainly different than during the genesis of video games itself. And I am speaking as someone who is definitely not a gamer in terms of the order of appearance or the year that they come out. The last video game I played was Halo 2. And I played it well after it came out. I think the Xbox One was already out by the time I pulled out Halo 2, just because, for multiple reasons. I'll get into that. But more after thinking about it some more, I just certainly sat back wondering, do video games count as art? Are video games art? I want to go into that topic, but before we do that, how are we segueing from our last podcast episode? Jeremy had mentioned gaming communities. That's something that I was, I guess, hyperbolically speaking, oblivious to. And the reason why is because I knew they were a thing. I knew you could do them, but that there's actually communities where there's regular interaction, like with social media, that surprised me. I figured it's just, well, I just can't put my finger on what that looks like, because if I play video games anymore at all, it's the N64. I pull it out when my brothers and cousins are in town, or when we're usually for a holiday, a family gathering, and we play it just like old times. We usually play Super Smash Brothers or Mario Kart. So, and that's pretty much all I know about video games at this point. But about video game communities, they are not social media. But what are they? And it's just I really am uninformed on this topic at all. And I wanted to ask Jeremy last time if he could just go into some more detail on, for lack of other words, the nature or the essence of video game communities. In other words, what are they? Jeremy, could you start us off with an explanation of what
Sure.
video game communities are, like if there's different kinds and so forth, and I know on my end, what video game genres are we talking about regarding video game communities?
So if there's a video game, there's a community. The just simply, if you go back to your example, you and your family playing the N64 together, you form, in a sense, a community around that game, right? It's something you do together, is relaxing, enjoying playing that game. But suppose you didn't have an N64, suppose you had a laptop or a desktop, and so did everyone else. Now you can play a game together from different parts of the United States or the world. And so that's how a gaming community in a lot of ways begins, is friends and family starting something together. When you play video game, oftentimes you run into others, and since we are social people, we're social beings, it's part of our nature to be social. You start making friends, you start making enemies. That's natural. There are people you're going to like and people you dislike, even in video games. And as you meet people, you become friends and you start building communities. And those communities will be first dedicated towards playing that game, but sometimes they grow. Some video game communities will expand to other games. Some will just have that video game, then they'll start talking about life because naturally, if you're friends, you're going to start talking about different things. Maybe it'll be something like food or photography or hiking. Some people like hiking together. Some people like they just share hobbies like flying kites or mountain biking. And next thing you know, people want to take the next step. They actually want to meet each other in person and they become friends. That's kind of a natural progression that I've seen among various communities is people getting together to play a video game. And usually how that video game is approached and played is what differentiates different communities from each other within that game. Different there are different play styles for games, and so you get communities based on those different play styles and strategies. Does that help give a kind of initial survey, Guillermo?
Absolutely. I did think you explained it beautifully, just pointing out the relationship aspect of the community itself. It started with family, it started with loved ones. Let's play this game.
Yeah,
And
it could just start with friends
mhm.
who, whether you've met in person or through a game, because you can just meet random people on the internet and become friends with them. So
Some further questions I have on my end are, I think, more technical questions. It's more of a, you kind of have to, you can only, I guess, analogously, it might be a poor analogy. You can only learn so much about fishing or basketball or anything, but to just thoroughly experience it, you have to do it. So I figured similarly with video games. So here I am kind of like, but how do you meet them? How do you connect? And I think the first instance that I recall of people playing online was in fact the Halo franchise, where you could connect over the internet and just play with people who happen to be online at the same time. And I kind of didn't question that. Like, oh, do you, I guess, do you just meet people, whoever signals that they're online, you go ahead and enter this digital realm together at the same time, and you communicate clearly and you can arrange when you're going to meet again. So
yeah,
that, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
so yeah, I mean, you you just take the Halo example. Suppose you meet some random person on your team, right? And you hit a sort of vibe with each other, you start joking in the game through the whether communication system they have, whether it's voice chat or text. You start building a relationship with someone just based off the in-game interactions through playing the game with just random people online. And with that, if you play enough rounds with this one person, that's where you start getting friendships. And then next step is you get a outside communication system going, whether it's Facebook or if you want to be old back in the day, you would use something like Skype or Rumble or TeamSpeak. Today, a lot of people use Discord. You connect and reach out to other people or to these people that you are now starting to game regularly with so that you can coordinate when will you be on so you can play together more. And that's precisely how communities will form organically.
That's fascinating. Now, um, to give a little bit of my background regarding video games, as I mentioned, Halo 2 was the last video game that I played, and I did not play online. I just played the course itself from beginning to end. And the reason why I played that game so late in my, for lack of other words, career or my life was because I was always into the Nintendo franchise. You know that, and I want to get into the Legend of Zelda shortly. I was just noticed Nintendo, I don't think they have any first person shooter video games. And that's also what I meant by gaming communities. In terms of, do you have first person shooter games? And even then, okay, do they revolve of shooting aliens? Are they World War II video games? Or like the
Right,
like the
right.
GoldenEye franchise, the James Bond franchise? So
Okay,
there's all that. Whoa, there's all that diversity, frankly, in this realm of not just uh social media but entertainment. Um,
right. And
mhm.
in general, I don't think it matters what game it is. If you can play it online together, you can have a community. So it's not restricted to first person shooters. Okay.
Interesting.
You think about Minecraft, it's all about building and creating things by mining. There are Minecraft communities where people just get together and play digital Legos all day together.
You know, speaking of Minecraft, I want to say that that was the game that um it was on the news that a couple was getting divorced because the husband, that's all he did all day.
There's several examples of things like that. Like if you look into the like old news articles, I'm sure you'll find many on World of Warcraft because
That's the one I was thinking of. My bad.
yeah, there a lot of people really got sucked into that game. I actually met a couple that got married through World of Warcraft, and when I met them, they had been married about 10 years
Aw,
at that point. I wouldn't
fascinating.
describe it necessarily as a happy relationship, but it wasn't a bad one either. It was an interesting one, but I think they truly loved each other.
Oh, it sure sounds like it. It's yes, of course, married for 10 years. And then it's just a way to connect. I remember a long time ago, you gave the analogy of a bar. You play the same video game, you meet people, you strike a conversation with someone who catches your interest, and obviously, well, I don't know if you could see each other, but if you could, and okay, sparks fly, and relationships develop from that, even romantic ones.
Yeah.
So, mhm,
Yeah, just speaking about that, like there's a real possibility people do find romance through online gaming communities. I've seen that firsthand. I've seen a couple get divorced because
mm,
of they were a man wife were playing together the same video game. And in fact, they were in the gaming community I ran, and that was interesting because they were essentially, I think, cheating on each other. So they got a nasty divorce, and the girl moved, ran off to a different state with another member of the same community
oh,
that I was
gee.
a part of. So it was a weird love triangle that happened through meeting in video games, and the both the man and the woman were to blame for various actions.
Wow. Of course, as we mentioned previously last time that, and we didn't say this word for word, or building off of what we said, good and evil can come from technology.
Right, right.
Mm,
Technology is a tool, and how you
yes.
use it
Mm,
depends on whether it's a good or bad use.
all
I
right.
have, yeah, I have met another couple where the girl was part of my community and she met a guy through the video game we are playing, he, because of her, joined the group and they just hit it off. And a couple years later, they got married. And as far as I know, they're still happily ever after. So I have seen firsthand, the kind of destructiveness and also the bringing together a video game can do. Um, in general, I'm sure some people are thinking, well, how can you really trust someone you've never seen online? And if you're the kind of person that just spends a lot of time on a video game, you can get a general sense of people. You kind of develop a knack of telling, okay, this person is bad, this person is pure evil, that and this person is a good person to hang out with, or this person is a okay person. They seem like an okay person, but I don't want to hang out with them. You get a general feel for different types of personalities.
That does make sense, especially analogously when my brothers and cousins and I would play GoldenEye. Yeah, we would form teams and so forth, and well, any video game really, depending on what we were doing to one another in the game itself, bonds would strengthen or weaken. Um, it's and I'm sure that would be no different online. Now, I think as we proceed, before I forget, what I would like for us to talk about is, yes, whether video games count as art. The reason why is because going back to what I was saying about how the N64, that was quote unquote my generation. But then I got into Halo, the Halo franchise, Halo 1 and 2, because my brothers were playing it. They were playing it. I had no interest in shooting aliens. And I think I was too busy with life. I don't know. College, I was an undergrad at the time. But when I got into Halo, but the reason why was because the music, in my opinion, is breathtaking. And to the point where I told myself I have to play this game. I started playing this video game just because of the soundtrack, the music. And say I like to compare it to The Legend of Zelda because the music in Zelda, it's I do see like an aesthetic value there, unlike, well, there's a beauty in that game, just not quite like in Super Mario, for example. Super Mario, it's more cartoonish, more comical. Zelda's more serious, more um not stoic. I can't put my words. I can't find the words for it. Whereas Zelda had a very visual and audible beauty, Halo, of course, it has both visual and audible, but it's the audible that captivated me in a way that I had to play the game itself. And yeah, it's a very visually stunning video game, in my opinion. So where what I was thinking about recently, at least shortly after our conversation, and something I've been wondering for a while, is it's that I would imagine a work of art essentially consists of the artist sculpting, painting, composing something for other people to admire, appreciate, enjoy, for other people to receive. I There's something in some video games, not all video games, frankly, of course, but in some video games that, wow, it's like listening to beautiful music because there's beautiful music in it. It's like seeing a beautiful work of art because of the the imagery in these scenes and so forth. It's like all those things, but what's radically different is the fact that the receiver of the art is also at some level an agent in that work of art. So the person is engaged in video games, obviously, unlike someone at a museum looking at paintings or listening to classical music in a concert. That's
Yeah,
why I Mhm.
I'm gonna have to have a hard disagree with you there, Guillermo.
With regarding what?
Um, about the last minute of everything you just said.
Yeah, yeah, please. Well, that's why
Yeah,
I
no,
was.
I think you've laid out kind of a position that has intuitive has a certain intuitiveness to it, right? Because you point out various elements that yes, they can be rather remarkable. So let's think about the video game itself. You have various components. You have to have the storyline.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have the graphics. You have to have the music. So you got, then of course there's the game mechanics itself, right? So in order for you to play the game, there has to be a way of playing it according to how the game is programmed, the mechanics. And all those elements have to interconnect and flow smoothly for it to work, right? So when you talk about music, music certainly has a beauty to it. And there is a lot of remarkably good video game music. I think you mentioned Halo, that's of course famous. We could also mention Skyrim as being famous for its music, amongst others. Um, I do find it funny that you talk about the graphics of Halo, and you're talking the first Halo game, right?
The first and the second.
First and second, and that is I don't know how many years ago. We're talking like 15 years ago,
Yeah,
Guillermo.
yeah,
Video game graphics have gone so far since then. It's remarkable.
definitely.
Um, so you think about a painting, okay? You start with a model or an idea, right?
Hmm.
And you have a subject and it is transfigured, it's changed into the painting, right? You have that artistic process of transfiguring it, of taking what it is presented before you and reinterpreting it. And that reinterpretation is a transfiguring. When you talk about a video game, yes, you use models, like you have 3D models of guns or aliens or humans and whatnot, but you don't have this transfiguration per se of the subject using a medium like marble or paint. You're using technology to create this thing. And when you use technology, yeah, it's not this process of transfiguring, but a process of technological reproduction or production, depending on what it is. There's an essential difference there. That essential difference is what differentiates painting, sculpture, and other things as art from video games as art. A video game is not going to be art in the same meaning as a painting will be, or a beautiful work of music, because it is about this technological reproduction. It's not to say that there are not aesthetic values to the video game or that different elements of that video game could be beautiful. You think about a photograph it can be very beautiful, even though it is in essence a technological production. You have the camera with its technology that captures the light in a certain way. And then if you want to be Photoshop savvy, you go through and you do some edits to bring to light a new way of seeing what it is you've captured. But with that, it's not a transfiguring through a human process per se, but you're using technology to do the changing. It's a different kind of tool, if that makes sense.
That makes absolute sense. And that was actually what I was going to ask you. Well, what about film,
Right.
for example? Is
So
that not art?
I think film, photography is, I think they're a higher art than, say, a video game,
Okay.
but they're going to be lower than something like a painting or a beautiful piece of music.
And I think this is where we can also include the theater arts
Right. I would put a play or a opera above as
film.
well.
Hmm. All right, that makes more sense. In the sense of the video game producers, yes,
Right.
yeah, that was a better way to put it, that there is aesthetic value in what they're doing in their given particular video game. Is it art? Well, art consists of something that the human person does, in a manner of speaking, without, for lack of other terms, electronic technology for editing. Because we could say, well, isn't paint and paintbrushes technology? Aren't instruments technology? Yeah, they are. Yeah, they are. But as you said, radically different than editing through these devices that are electronic. Um, and it doesn't mean that there's no aesthetic value in any of those. But I do think that helps answer our question.
Yeah.
That was the question that I had anyway.
Yeah. We could also point out another aspect of a video game. You think about a video game, its purpose is entertainment.
Of course, that is something that crossed my mind. Okay, but
The
entertainment
point,
and uh-huh.
yeah, the point of a video game is entertainment. The point of some movies is entertainment. Once you are making something for entertainment, you're not making it with this idea of it being art. You don't have a good video game if it's not entertaining, if that makes sense.
Oh, that makes perfect sense. But oh, well, I had a thought. I think this helps shed light some more on what social media is, because I can't bring myself to say that it's primarily for entertainment, but rather for communication.
Right. And
The
that,
way, just real quick, the way
yeah,
it panned out, of course, there's this entertainment, I think, attitude behind it nonetheless,
yeah,
because of
I
its
did,
addictive nature.
right. And you get that video games too, just it has a addictiveness to it because of how screens affect a brain where
Mm,
where it releases dopamine.
yes.
But I guess just something to keep in mind is when it comes to the video game, you even though it is for entertainment, that doesn't mean a person cannot be captivated by that game in a true sense that makes it feel artistic.
Mm,
Right. There are some movies, for example, that I would say, yes, that is art because of how well they are done, even though
yes.
I just said, they are a lesser art in a sense, but there is still something truly art-like about those activity of making the film or making a photo for that matter and being able to use the technology in a way to represent reality to show something that people did not see. That's part of what what makes a good film good is having us encounter reality in a way that was previously unseen. Um, in some respects, a video game can do that, but the mode of a video game is essentially different from what we typically consider art because you're not a aesthetic looker, listener, or in in this sense because you are actively participating in it.
Yes,
You create your narrative, and depending on the game, like if you play a MMO, your actions, or also a RPG, your actions drive the storyline. And um that's how the game is programmed. Your actions matter and what you do changes how the game is going to interact with you. It's dynamic in this respect, and that's something remarkable about how these games are programmed is just the in-game choices you make changes how the story is told. And um, so when you're playing it, you're actively interacting with it. So in this sense, I think we have to keep in mind it is more like a game, right? You have this active participation for the
that's
purpose
interesting.
of leisure, if that makes sense.
Oh, that makes perfect sense.
You don't call baseball beautiful, but you go and you enjoy playing the game or you enjoy watching the game.
Real quick, if I may interject real quick, we can say that there's beauty in sports.
Sure, in some respect.
Yeah. Oh, it's not art, but
It's not art, but
yeah.
it's a different kind of beauty.
Mm,
Like if you watch a game where you have this really good yeah, my mind blanked on the term.
a three-pointer,
I don't know what you're talking about there.
basketball.
Oh, sure.
So,
You get someone like Michael Jordan,
mm-hmm.
there's someone who's really good at their sport, or maybe a Tom Brady or someone.
Oh,
You just when you look at some of these great players,
mm,
there's a sort of beauty to it in a
oh yeah.
sense that they have so mastered their skill that it just appears beautiful what they're able to do. And I think that's part of like the power of the Olympics. You have all these amazing athletes from all over the world who are the best of the world coming together, and you get to watch their skills on display. There's something drawing about that remarkable, but it's not going to be a beauty in the sense of a beautiful painting
Okay.
or a sculpture, right?
Look, yeah. Well, it sure looks like in the end, this is a question of beauty.
Well, the thing to keep in mind is that there are more aesthetic values than just simply beauty alone.
Like what?
Um, Comedy is its own
Oh,
aesthetic value. So you think about a comedy, whether it is a play or a movie, they're not necessarily beautiful things, but a truly funny movie has its own value as comedy, or a tragedy for that matter.
all right.
Tragedy is also its own aesthetic value.
Mm-hmm.
Another one could be is simply elegance, right? You think about you go to a fancy restaurant and you sit there and everyone's wearing a suit and tie. Ladies are in a dress. There's a certain decorum, there's a certain elegance to the whole affair of eating that meal with everyone else with the beautiful music in the background. You have the beautiful setting at the table, the atmosphere. There's a aesthetic value of elegance there.
Of course, I don't disagree at all. It's just
Um,
that. Mhm.
yeah, it's we normally think of that aesthetic value and identify beauty, but you can even talk about the aesthetic value of a, say, a good beer or bottle of wine,
That's what I was thinking.
because when when you talk about food and drink, some foods are prepared better than others. There is a significant difference of going to McDonald's for a burger versus going to a restaurant where they actually take care of their food preparation and make their own buns right there on the spot. They have a nice cheese, etc. When you take care of all those little details that goes into your burger versus just trying to mass produce something as cheap as
Sure.
possible,
Hmm.
there is going to be a aesthetic difference. And so that specially crafted meal will have a aesthetic value that the other will not have.
Because what else came to mind were the terms digital arts and culinary arts.
Right. And what you get now is a hierarchy of types of art. You have art in a strict sense that
Okay,
is what you would call the painting, the sculpture, architecture, music, literature. But then you do have a wider sense of art that you can include where it is more of these kind of applied cases like cooking, because cooking has an art to it in a
of
broader
course.
sense.
Oh yeah.
And a well-crafted meal has an aesthetic value to it versus just slopping together some mac and cheese and maybe some hamburger meat and calling that a meal, right? That is just eating to keep your body nourished. That's not right. That's just kind of trying to meet like a bare minimum, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Or I think another example would be, what was it now? Yeah, I blanked on it.
Okay. If it
But
comes,
yeah, if it comes back, I'll be sure to speak up on that.
yes, please do.
Oh,
Now,
fashion. Fashion.
uh,
Fashion is another thing that is not art in the strict or in a strict sense, but in a more wider sense, because clothes can have a sort of beauty to it.
of course.
Jewelry also. There, some people are talented in making beautiful jewelry, some are not, but that is also more of an applied art. Also, furniture or a carpet or like a nice rug or a tapestry. All these different things have an element of, they can have aesthetic value while not being beautiful per se, if that
Okay,
makes sense.
it does. Now, I think we've thoroughly answered the question that video games are entertainment with the aesthetic value that is there depending on the video game itself.
Right. And so when you think about a video game, you really have several different elements being tossed together, because you can have a terrible video game in terms of mechanics. It's not good to play, but it could have stunning graphics or it could have stunning music, right?
Hmm.
So you could have a video game that's good at some things but bad at other things, which is interesting because with the painting, if it's bad at something, that just destroys the
Sure.
painting. With the video game, in some respect, yes, it's not good, but whatever. You don't even need to have good graphics to be a popular game. You think
Oh,
about
absolutely not.
Minecraft. Minecraft has terrible graphics in a sense because it's very simplistic. but it's also very effective. It's not it's not necessarily a beautiful game to look at, but neither is it ugly. It is just with that style, it is I guess it's there, and it's something that people and you can enjoy it, but you can't call it beautiful.
Interesting.
And it just the way it's done, it doesn't take away from the video game, right? You, or if you think about Borderlands, it's very cartoony looking. There are other games too that look very cartoony. That's just how the game is. That's what they chose for the game to look like. Whereas others go for a more realistic look. So in some respect, a good video game can be independent of having good graphics, especially if you start talking about some of the older games from the 80s and 90s where you don't have graphics and as good, right? The graphics are not comparable with what we have today. And yet there are good games from
Yeah.
back then.
No, I barely remember the Super Nintendo.
Yeah. Yeah, Super Nintendo, classic example.
Yeah,
Good games, but terrible graphics.
sure. Well, that's all they had to work with
Exactly.
at the time.
Exactly. Another thing to, I guess, just think about with a video game, some video games, you're able to go and explore worlds. You just get to wander around. So one game that I do is Lord of the Rings Online, and one of the things that draws me to the game is that you're just able to go and just simply explore, walk around, ride your horse around the countryside. And some of the graphics in the game is rather stunning for how old of the game it is.
All right. That's very interesting. Um, let me see. And Lord of the Rings Online, you said it's called?
Yeah, it's a MMO.
Okay.
So it's same genre in a sense as World of Warcraft,
Mm.
massive multiplayer online.
Mm-hmm.
And so what makes it interesting is you don't really have too much of player versus player interaction. It's more of I think groups of players versus monsters or just yourself against monsters. I
Yeah.
haven't actually looked into the social elements of it. So you might have like different gaming communities that do raids against others, but I haven't really looked into that stuff.
So you
So
can even
I have
form
no idea.
gangs online.
Oh yeah. I mean,
What?
people people certainly do that, form gangs and groups.
Oh,
It
gee.
it goes back to community. I don't remember what game it was my cousin was playing, but it was one of those games where you have to collect supplies and try and survive the elements, so you have to make food and shelter and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And another community or just they pretty much just behave as roving bandits and they just went over to their encampment and destroyed it. And so they had a kind of war with this roving gang of bandits. So you get things like that, and that's just part of video games.
Gee, I don't know if I want to play these or not. Because I was very addicted to video games when I was younger.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, no.
Um, well,
Once
boy.
you throw community into a video game, I think they become a lot more addictive because now you're doing things with people and that
Yes.
adds an element of fun.
Okay. Okay. And just coming back to a thought that I had, it's just the interesting twist that video games had done because in the end, well, excuse me, in previously we mentioned that video games that they're part of social media but I would imagine their primary end is and was entertainment rather than communicating with other people.
Right. You get you have this primary purpose of entertainment, but now video games are very social. It's about that connecting with others, that inter networking, because that networking within a game usually allows people to say either get supplies easier or be able to defend themselves against others, depending on the kind of game, or to actually participate the game in a deeper way where you can actually accomplish objectives in a
Mm,
more easily or just unattainable before.
all right. And before I forget, do you mind me asking what genre of video game your video game community or communities are?
Yeah, so I'm the community that um began and founded with my cousin was a first person shooter.
And you just
And
shoot other people?
yeah, so the premise of the game is you have three factions that are fighting over continents, and you have hundreds of players on these continents just shooting each other trying to take territory. And so you get an element of RTS, that's real time strategy, and it has this element of MMO because you have first person shooter, but now you have groups of people, say 20, 30, 50, 100, working together on this objective of trying to take territory in a sometimes meaningful manner, usually not, because most people don't really think strategically when it comes to video games, when it comes to first person shooters, I should say.
Okay. And one other thing on a more negative note, something Charles said in the last podcast episode, paraphrasing what he said, how much more, just regarding the fact that through social media, through technological advances, and he used the example of the industrial revolutions that there have been, that for every single industrial revolution, there's a depersonalization of the human person or a dehumanization of the human person. How much more dehumanized can we get? Do you
Well,
think? Hmm?
continue your thought.
I was just wondering if video games would contribute to this depersonalization or this dehumanization, or no,
I
or it depends on the game.
I think it really depends on the person.
Okay.
At some respect, you talk about a video game, you're not interacting physically present with each other. You're acting through technology divided by distance, and you may never meet the people you play the game with.
Okay.
And so, in this respect, you've lost a lot of the interpersonal. So, there is, in a sense, a depersonalization going on
Mm-hmm.
because you do not have the social interaction like you would have with just going out with your friends, going out to dinner, going to a movie, going for a hike, whatever.
Yes.
You lost that human touch in some respect.
Mm-hmm.
It's not to say that you can't have that human touch with an online community, because you can a little bit when it comes to voice communications. That's something where something like Discord or TeamSpeak really shine, is that voice communication, or even within video games without their various voice channels. But at the same time, these take away from activities that are more truly personal, like just playing baseball with friends or football. You don't have kids getting together to play baseball. they get together and play video games. You lose, there's something
Mm,
sacrificed there with that change.
funny. I not too long ago watched The Sandlot.
Right. I was actually thinking about that movie what as I was saying that.
There's a tragedy there, man. There's a
Exactly.
tragedy there. But with the lockdown, like, all right, let's just make do with what we've got. And if this is, like you said, it depends on the person. If this just has the potential to be a healthy alternative, well, then all right.
Right. So in some respect, you can do good through a video game.
Of course.
When you start talking about the average gamer, they really struggle with concupiscence.
Hmm.
They really struggle with sexual sin, whether it's fornication, masturbation, or also the problems with transgenderism, homosexuality. You throw all those problems in there. I think the gamer, in a lot of ways, suffers those problems. Also, drug abuse, and whether it's something like cocaine, marijuana, or alcohol. These are the types of things I've seen people struggle with the most in a video game. And I think that's partly just because of the demographics, because it's usually younger people. And there is a emphasis more so on young men than women, even though there are a lot of female gamers out there. But when you take the young people, a lot of them are high schoolers, a lot are middle schoolers, a lot are college students. They're still trying to figure out life. A lot of them are lost because of the problems of our modern ideologies.
Oh,
And so when you take that and concupiscence into account, a lot of these communities embrace all sorts of things like the transgender movement or just having pornography in their various communication platforms, whether it's something like Discord or they talk about various things or they accept, they accept porn. Some will even be Holocaust deniers and promote
what?
Nazism. You get the whole wide work. Some will promote communism, some just promote atheism.
You know,
So it's, in a sense, it's kind of like the Wild West
ooh,
because you can find every kind of person on the internet, and some of those people may sound nice and sane until you start talking to them, and then you realize they are really screwed up. And it really goes to show just how much damage there is in our society. And for some of these people, video games, I think, are literally how they hang on and get through and not go crazy. I do know firsthand of some people that if it wasn't for a gaming community, they would have committed suicide because their life outside of the video game was so terrible, and the video game was how they got through it.
wow. Then that's tragic. Thank God that they are alive,
Yeah,
that they don't go through the suicide. But
I
yeah, no, well, no buts. If this
yeah,
helped, great. Praise
yeah.
God.
So if you are going to play a video game, you have a unique opportunity to be a role model by saying no to certain things,
Mm,
like no to pornography if you run a community, right? That's simple. If you keep porn out, keep racism, whatnot out, keep a certain level of decency, that makes a better community right there. And it forces people to either become better or they have to leave, you know,
that's
because now they
interesting.
have to make a choice. Do I
Yeah.
want to be part of this community or do I want to embrace porn? right? If you make a no porn allowed in this Discord server, then they have to make that decision at some respect. Or if you say no cursing, now they have to choose. Well, am I going to choose just being able to say the F word whenever I want or leave, you know,
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
say, yeah, there's various things you can do like that. Or you can have people that, you could have someone that's like, oh, I'm going to go get drunk tonight. And you just say, well, I've never been drunk. It's like, why? You know, something as simple as that startles people. There are some people that find it hard to believe that someone could have never gotten drunk and never desired to get drunk. They just think that's just how people are.
Yeah, this does thoroughly go into the next thing that I was wondering that which I recommend we wrap up with, is that video games and video game communities, as weird as this is going to sound, can they be a part of the new evangelization, and or in the twofold sense of also promoting the dignity? Can they be used to promote the dignity of the human person? And it really just sounds like, well, like any form of communication, yeah, like on Twitter, like on Facebook, like on TikTok, whatever. Yeah, preach the gospel to whoever you're interacting with.
Yeah, I have known some gaming communities that are all about incorporating Christianity within their games. So I've known some communities that before they start doing whatever their community event is, they'll have a prayer and
Oh
they'll
wow.
spend like 10, 15 minutes just praying together or reading some Bible verses, and then they start doing their thing. You
Oh,
get there are people who do things like that and they do draw people to them. Or it could just be something as simple as forcing people to maintain a certain level of decency. You're
sure.
not really you're not really evangelizing directly in any manner, but on the other hand, those people now are not in somewhere where they're having direct access to, say, gay furry porn or something.
All right. Yeah, it's a way to get the point across. Look, this is these are the moral values that we are going to uphold if we are going to maintain this community. And
Right.
therefore, just logically, you have the option or to be in it or not. And if your faith is clear, vocalized, then they know where you're coming from, and it gives people a taste of what um, Christian communities are like, and people who promote decency. Okay, this is what it's like,
Yeah.
and just hopefully it would give people, in a manner of speaking, just that paradigm shift of these are
Yeah.
real people. There are real people who promote these values of goodness and decency, and and maybe I'm being hyperbolic, but just as we're told that sometimes you might be the only Bible that people read, well, this is just one way of doing that.
Yeah. I mean, there are various kinds of communities one can form. You can have an explicitly religious type of community where you're doing religious things together, like reading the Bible, praying together before you play games, and kind of holding each other accountable where you're like, well, don't spend too much time playing the
Sure.
game, making sure people are not addicted. There are communities who do those sorts of things, and that's a very good thing. Then, of course, you can have something where it's a little bit more laid back in a sense, where it's like we're going to, in a sense, be agnostic, but we're going to maintain a certain level of decency. I mean, there's various ways one can approach the problem,
Mm-hmm.
and different approaches will attract people because, quite frankly, a lot of people, as atheists and agnostics, they're not going to want to go join a group that has a bunch of Bible stuff involved, if that makes sense. They just want to play the game.
Yeah.
So if you have a group that has those religious elements involved, you may you may attract some agnostics and atheists, but you might also draw or push some away just simply because, oh, that's religious. And you do have this bad vibe among people that religious people are irrational.
Mm.
So it and of course there's other ways to be a Catholic gamer. You have Catholics who do streams, who do live video feeds, through YouTube, Twitch, and whatnot. And there they start building audiences and they talk about their faith and various church teachings, and that's another way you can be a Catholic gamer.
Okay. And then at least as of right now, there's no explicitly Catholic video games.
There probably is something out there, but it's not going to be anything mainstream like, say, Halo or
Okay.
whatnot.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Okay. Maybe someday. Um,
Well, what it takes is money. You gotta have people
sure.
with the money to fund that game, and then you have to have the marketing. That's what it really comes down to. It's like, why don't you have movies about saints? Well, you have to have someone to invest in the project first, and then you have to have a good team to pull it through between the creators and the advertisers.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it comes down to.
Yeah. All right. We'll go ahead and we'll pray for any individuals who are contemplating this. Like a little, uh, not to brag, but like ourselves. Okay, we should really start a website that focuses on addressing the dignity of the human person, and with that catalyst of refuting the objections of radical traditionalism, maybe someone out there is itching to start a Catholic video game community. And we'll keep them in our prayers, or pray that someone come along and do that, because yeah,
Yeah,
it sounds big. It sounds like it could potentially be something big.
yeah. No, there's real needs for that
Okay.
for Catholic communities in various respects.
All right.
Um, Before I forget, as we are wrapping up our video, if my comments about aesthetics has interested anyone, I want to recommend that the listener checks out Aesthetics by Dietrich von Hildebrand. It is a two-volume work which spans a total of about 1,000 pages. But if the comments I said about aesthetics and various types of art interest you and the various types of aesthetic values, I've pulled all of that just from Hildebrand's philosophy of art in his book called Aesthetics. Each volume is about 20 bucks off Amazon, published by the Hildebrand Press. Highly recommend.
Excellent. All right. Thank you for that recommendation. Um, all right. That's it for today's episode. Um, any announcements, Jeremy?
Um, our Theology of the Body video series uh, begins September 5th of this year. And every week we'll be releasing two videos on Mondays and Fridays. We are going through every single audience of the Theology of the Body, all 130 some. That means 130 some audiences. So stick around. We'll be publishing those for a little over a year. Many, many audiences.
Excellent. Yeah, and it's gonna be great. I can't wait. All right, and I don't have any announcements on my end. Just let me see. Do you have any prayer intentions, Jeremy?
Before prayer intentions, I do want to
Okay.
mention that if you do want early access to the Theology of the Body videos, subscribe to our Patreon, and uh, the links to the videos are there, and you can start watching them today instead of waiting. every week for the new videos.
Excellent.
As far as prayer intentions go, um, our website, our
Mm-hmm.
video
Mm-hmm.
series on theology body, that it brings light and truth to many people. And for anyone who's interested in starting a Catholic community for
Precisely.
gamers, go ahead and do so. Try it. Just don't let it take up too much of your life because you need to spend time outside.
Mm-hmm. All right. And those are my intentions as well. And we'll pray for Charles for his intentions. But all right. All right, everyone. Thank you all for tuning in. God bless. We bid you adieu.
Yep. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.